This ball is crushed.
You're listening to the New York Yankees Recaps podcast, where we're talking New York Yankees baseball all season long. Recaps of big games, the best home run calls, trades, rumors, and what's happening down on the farm. Every game, all season long.
So I don't know about you guys, but during the off-season, when there's not a lot of Yankees news happening, at least after the winter meetings and all that stuff is over, and there's kind of a lull between mid-December and spring training, you might see a couple guys get picked up. You might see a late winter trade. Roger Clemens was picked up right before spring training, and maybe even on the first day of spring training. But during this time of year, I spent a lot of time watching old Yankees documentaries, TV shows like The Bronx is Burning, which was the ESPN miniseries about the 1978, maybe it was 1977 New York Yankees, the year that Reggie Jackson joined the team. It was also the year of the Son of Sam murders in the Bronx. I forget his name, Dave Berkowitz, I think his name. Anyway, that's always an interesting show to rewatch because, it's a historical piece as well as a baseball series. So I rewatch that, maybe not every year, but maybe every other year in about January. I also go back and watch a lot of the Yankeeographies and the Sports Century episodes. I just watched the 30 for 30 on the House of Steinbrenner, which was about George Steinbrenner, but also about the construction of the new Yankee Stadium. But obviously that one's called House of Steinbrenner, but the original Yankee Stadium was the house that Ruth built. I just also watched The Babe, the early 90s film with John Goodman. Obviously, I'm a big movies fan. I've got a movies podcast called The Ski Lodge. Well, it's not all movies. It's a lot of movie stuff, but it's not all movies. So anyway, I am super interested in finding out more about Yankees history each year. So I've been watching a lot of Babe Ruth documentaries after that, and I've just been thinking a lot about this larger-than-life guy. How awesome it must have been to see him play. My grandfather actually saw him play, and he said that he used to hit the ball really, really high. It would just float out of the ballpark. And back then, baseball was a game that was played more small ball. A lot of guys couldn't hit home runs. The ball wasn't wound as tightly. The bats didn't have knobs until Babe Ruth. He invented the knob on the bat. And a lot of guys just tried to slap the ball, play kind of a cricket type of game where you're playing for one run, that type of stuff. There's also a great episode of the Ken Burns documentary Baseball called A National Heirloom. It's about Babe Ruth. So Babe Ruth has become this legendary, iconic American. He's got these great nicknames: the Bambino, the Sultan of Swat, the Colossus of Clout, and simply the Babe. But people forget that George Herman Babe Ruth was a real person with a real childhood. He was born on February 6th, 1895. At age 7, he was giving his folks a lot of trouble. They were having trouble carousing him. He was stealing booze and smoking and spending all day at the docks in Maryland when he should have been in school. So his folks took him over to the St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys. It was a reformatory school where he was mentored by a guy named Brother Matthias. He was a disciplinarian, and he was a baseball player, and he's the one who got Babe Ruth into baseball. So I had to look it up. Babe Ruth was labeled as incorrigible, which means someone who is bad beyond reform, cannot be corrected. I think that's a junk diagnosis for somebody who, it seems like, just didn't get proper, home training. By 1916, Babe Ruth had developed a reputation as a solid left-handed pitcher who was doing a nice job, but he would also occasionally hit these gigantic, prodigious home runs, which was unusual for any player back then. I mean, not many players hit home runs at all in the league, and to see a pitcher doing it was even more unusual. So the Red Sox were content to keep Babe Ruth as a pitcher. He had won 23 games twice in his young career. But he wanted to play every day. I mean, he liked to hit, as they say in the Babe. I like to hit home runs. He liked to hit home runs. And so he wanted to play every day. And so in 1919, that's exactly what he did. And he broke the all-time home run record at that point. Just to give you a quick look at his stats with Boston. In 1918, as a hitter, he batted .300 with 11 home runs and 61 RBIs in 95 games. And then in 1919, he batted .322 with a .456 on-base percentage, a .657 slugging percentage, a 1.114 OPS, 29 home runs, and 113 RBIs in 130 games. This was his age 24 season. So he was just coming into his own. Unfortunately for the Red Sox fans, the team owner, Harry Frazee, had financed a number of Broadway theater productions. One of which was No No Nanette, which bombed horribly. It was terrible. I mean, I don't say that from experience. I never have seen it. I don't know anybody who's seen it, but the contemporary reviews are that it sucked badly. So it tanked, and Harry Frazee was out his investment, which was about $125,000. So in order to get out from this debt, he sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. And the rest is history, but I'll tell it to you anyway. Now, Babe became a full-time outfielder when he was with the Yankees. But a lot of people don't know that he actually pitched a little bit with the Yankees too. He pitched one game in 1925. He pitched 4 innings, allowed 2 runs, had 2 walks, no strikeouts. In 1921, which was his age 26 season, he was 2-0. He appeared in 2 games, 1 game started, 1 game finished, 9 innings, 9 runs. So he had a bad ERA. The first 2 years with the Yankees, 4.50 and 9.00. In 1930, which was his age 35 season, he pitched 1 game, and he pitched 9 innings, 11 hits, 3 runs. So not bad after missing 9 years. He pitched again in 1933 at age 38. He had a 5 ERA. He pitched 9 innings, gave up 5 runs. Did not strike out a batter. Throwing BP at that point. So let's go back and look at his hitting stats. Beginning in his first year with the Yankees, which was 1920, his numbers are just ridiculous. They're just insane. In 1920, Babe Ruth played in 142 games. He batted .376. He hit 54 home runs. He had 135 RBIs. He had 14 stolen bases. And he walked 150 times and only struck out 80 times. You know, everybody talks about how much Babe Ruth struck out. He didn't strike out that much. I mean, he hit a ton of home runs and didn't strike out nearly as much as some of the modern players. Now, pitchers didn't have as nasty as stuff. You know, there was no drive-line baseball with, you know, super HD cameras that were tracking spin rate in 1920. But those numbers are insane. 1.379 OPS, 847 slugging percentage. That's insane. You know, one thing about Babe Ruth is that the annals of history have filled with legend about this guy. There was the little kid in the hospital that was very sick and asked Babe Ruth to hit 2 home runs, and he did in that game. He couldn't remember anybody's name, so he called everybody Kid, or he pronounced it Keed. Keed. Hey, Keed. Somebody joked with him in the locker room because he never wore clean underwear. He would wear the same pair of underwear for 5, 6, 7 days in a row, and people would kid him about it, so he just stopped wearing underwear altogether for most of his life. And then there's, of course, the called shot in the 1932 World Series where he supposedly told the pitcher that he was going to hit the next pitch past the center field flagpole, and apparently that's what he did. Everybody says that he pointed and he said he was going to do this. Now, it's probably not as dramatic as you've seen in the movies, but he really made this happen, and he was a beast. 1921, his age 26 season. He somehow gets even better. He hits 2 points higher, 378. He hits 5 more home runs, 59. He drives in 33 more runs, 168. And he walks 145 times, good for a .512 on-base percentage. His OPS plus, which is adjusted OPS for the park and against the league, is .238, which means he was 138% better than the average hitter. Oh, man. In 1922, he missed some time. I think that was the year they said he had this mysterious bellyache heard around the world, which rumors are was syphilis from all of his shenanigans off the field. He batted .315 with 35 home runs and 96 RBIs, still very nice, but didn't lead the league in home runs. In 1923, another World Series championship team for the Yankees, in which they opened Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built. You expect his numbers to go up because of the short right field porch, and they did. .393 batting average, 41 home runs, 130 RBIs. He played in 152 games, 399 total bases, and won his only MVP. Back then, you could only win it one time. So, who knows how many MVPs he would have if he had these numbers in the modern era. I mean, just looking at it, probably at least 8 or 10 MVP seasons. But the fact that he hit .393 in 1923 is very impressive. He follows up a outstanding 1923 season with another great 1924 season. .378 batting average, 46 home runs, 124 RBIs, scores another 143 runs. He's very durable. That's back-to-back seasons with over 150 games played. Take out the syphilis in 1922, and he would have had 4 straight seasons with over 150 games played. 1925, he begins to have some trouble. He is in his age 30 season, so maybe beginning to feel his decline creeping closer and closer. He's drinking more. He's staying out all night. He's getting in fights on the field. He's arguing with umpires and bumping umpires. He only plays in 98 games, and I think he's suspended 3 or 4 times. He batted .290 with 25 home runs, 67 RBIs. Not bad for a supposedly down season. The Babe was just incredible like that. He could stay up all night, play in the game, eat 5 hot dogs during the game, have a soda, and hit 2 home runs. He was that type of player. In 1926, it was his age 31 season. At this point, Babe Ruth has put up several great years, but he had a down year the previous season. You're wondering what he's going to come back and do. Well, he spends the winter in his abandoned farm, upstate, home plate farm, getting in shape, and he has a great year. .372 average, 47 home runs, 153 RBIs. These are video game numbers. These are absolutely bonkers. Scores another 139 runs, stole 11 bases. Babe Ruth, people give him a lot of crap because he was heavy set. He was a big guy, but he wasn't always a really big fat guy. It was more so towards the end of his career. I mean, he was heavy. I mean, you can't eat 5 hot dogs during a baseball game and not put on some weight, but early on in his career, he was listed as 6'2", 215 pounds. 1927, Babe Ruth sets the all-time home run record, which would stand for over 30 years. He hits 60 home runs. What you're seeing on the screen now is his 60th home run that season. He batted .356, 137 walks, 158 runs scored. That was the 1927 Murderers Row Yankees, which won 110 games. There were 110 and 44. So outstanding season from the New York Yankees. 1928, again, dominant year for Ruth. 323 batting average, 54 home runs, 146 RBIs, 137 walks. He's very consistent, 163 runs. Very, very consistent numbers from Babe Ruth. So Babe Ruth continues to dominate for the New York Yankees for the next several years. 1929, 46 home runs. 1930, 49 home runs. 1931, 46 home runs. 1932, that was the year of the famous called shot, 41 home runs. The called shot was not reported at the time, other than maybe some slight gestures or whatnot. It didn't become the legend of the called shot until years later, as the Babe's own legend began to grow. 1933, perhaps his last really good season. His age 38 season, he played in 137 games, batted .301 with 34 home runs and 104 RBIs. Followed that up in 1934 with .288, 22 home runs, 84 RBIs. Not the same player, still good, still an all-star. In 1935, he plays with the Boston Braves of the National League, with the hope that, he can eventually become a manager of the team. However, he, at this point in his career, was more of a side act. He batted just .181 with 6 home runs and 12 RBIs, though he did hit 3 home runs during one of his final games. In the movie, they show it as his final game, and in the 1998 video game, Triple Play 98, they had a trivia question where it said it was his final game, but I don't believe it actually was his final game. So to solve this mystery once and for all, I went to baseballreference.com, which shows the game logs for every season for which there are records. And it shows that on May 25th of that year, the Babe had 3 home runs and 6 RBIs. However, he did appear in 5 games after that. He did not record any hits, didn't drive in any home runs. He did have 1 RBI. He had 2 walks, 3 walks, 4. He had 4 walks, 5 strikeouts, no hits. So he finished the season under 200 at 181 with 6 home runs. He should have retired after that 3 home run game. So that's a point where the movie took license, and I think the video game, whoever was writing the game, probably some developer in Japan or something like that, just grabbed some trivia that they found in the movie. But anyway, that solves that mystery. I'd always wondered about that. Babe Ruth did not hit 3 home runs in his final game. However, his last 3 hits were all home runs against Pittsburgh. So if you're watching on YouTube, you might notice I switched my hat because I went back and edited a few things into this podcast after I recorded the initial bit, which was about 18 minutes. I wanted to add a little bit more. I wanted to talk a little bit about his post-playing career. He really wanted to get into managing. That was his dream. But unfortunately for the Babe, it never came to fruition. He ended up getting very, very sick, which to him was a mystery illness. He had cancer, and they just didn't tell him because they thought that once he found out that he was dying of terminal cancer, that he would just jump out of a window. But he was withering away. He had really bad headaches over the last few years of his life. There's a picture of him at Lou Gehrig's funeral that I found when I was searching for pictures of the Babe's funeral. And then I also have this picture of the Babe's funeral, which you can see on the screen right now. He died at just age 53, but his legacy is that of the all-time greatest baseball player. So not bad for an orphaned kid who grew up in a reformatory or whatever it's called. I heard some interesting stories. When he first got into the major leagues, when he was first adopted by the Baltimore Orioles, he had never eaten in a restaurant. He had never, been in a car. He had never really been outside of the orphanage since he was 6 or 7 years old. So, of course he's going to live large. And a lot of that probably contributed towards his early demise. When he died, his body lied in state at Yankee Stadium, and there was just hundreds of thousands of people that came to view his casket, and the headlines in the newspaper read, "Safe at home." So it's one great thing about being a Yankee fan is that we have this rich history of all these great players, none bigger than Babe Ruth, who saved baseball after the 1919 White Sox throwing the World Series scandal. So, by the way, some people say that Babe Ruth copied Joe Jackson's swing. I don't know if that's the case because Babe Ruth had a swing, in the orphanage that he learned. They probably both had kind of an uppercut or whatever because they both had power, but Jackson's power was nothing compared to the Babe. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Reminder that if you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe on like Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, whatnot. And likewise, if you're on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher or whatever you're listening on, whatever platform, you can always come to YouTube. I do daily updates. Not every one of these podcasts, these long form, 20 plus minute podcasts, is going to be on YouTube, but a lot of them will, especially if I do a historical topic like this. Before the season comes around, I'm sure I'll do some profiles of different seasons in Yankee history. I want to talk about the 2009 season a lot. I want to talk about the 1996 season. I talked a little bit in the introductory channel pilot, I guess, for the podcast, episode 1, about the 96 season. But I want to talk about that season a little bit more. I want to talk about the 99 season and the 2000 seasons, part of the trilogy of World Series titles that the Yankees had at the end of last century. So tune in all season long. I'll be talking about prospects. I'll be doing a video about Estevan Florial pretty soon. And if you're seeing this far in the future, hopefully the podcast is a hit. Hopefully I'm still alive. We'll see. But thanks for joining. This has been an NYY New York Yankees Recaps podcast, looking way back at the career and life of the great Bambino, George Herman, the Babe Ruth.